afterwards. I want to welcome you for taking this time to enjoy us today, and thank you. My name is Sharita Davis, and I'm one of the panelists um, here for Key Elementary. I also have joining me Mr. Steve Golden, and we will be interviewing today for an early childhood education teaching position. The way it will work is we'll take turns asking you a series of questions about your educational experiences. We will then encourage you to ask any questions at the end. At the conclusion of the interview, we will place you in a breakout room so that we can debrief as a panel. And once we bring you back, we'll provide you with some feedback, hopefully to add value to your career journey. Before we begin, are there any questions that you have for us?
Not at the moment.
Okay. All righty. And that's this time I will turn it over to Mr. Golden.
Good afternoon. Can you provide an example of a time when you successfully differentiated instruction to meet the diverse learning needs of your students?
One time that I differentiated was when I did one of my lessons. It was a scavenger hunt, and I had my students in groups, and basically they had to work together to solve the problems around the room, and they had to solve the problems around the room, and they could talk to each other, work together, and do what was needed to get the task done.
Okay, thank you. All right. Describe a specific experience where you effectively managed a challenging behavior in the classroom. What strategies did you use and what was the outcome?
One one strategy I did use in my student teaching was when my students have conflict with each other, I tend to pull one and I talk to them and I use like breathing techniques, different breathing techniques, and I tell them to count and I get them to recount their experience, and then I bring in the other student and I get their experience, and then we solve the problem together. I also get them to apologize to each other. So no side is taken at all.
Okay. Tell us about a time when you collaborated with colleagues to develop and implement an engaging and effective lesson or unit. What was your role and how did the collaboration contribute to student learning?
One time I collaborated with a colleague was when I did my Civil War lesson, and I asked my CT what we were going over, what the standard was, and she gave me some excellent resources that I could use. I also turned that into an engaging lesson where I had um, my students. It was a it was a scavenger hunt. So I had my students click through a PowerPoint looking for the different resources that I hidden in there. I've included a quizzes, different videos, and I had a reading comprehension assignment in there. I also had her feedback over what I did and what I could improve on that lesson before I did it.
Share a situation in which you successfully adapted your teaching style to accommodate a student with disabilities. What strategies did you implement and what were the results?
So, one strategy that I use for a student with disabilities is I kind of pulled them to me while my teacher was going over the lesson, and I noticed that they were kind of slowing down and they kind of didn't understand it. So I took them to the side and I explained it as he was going. I kept I kept explaining it, and I used different strategies than what he was using to be able to get my student to understand what was going on.
Give an example of a time when you used positive reinforcement to motivate and encourage student participation and academic achievement.
So, one time that I used positive reinforcement to encourage engagement um, was going back to my scavenger hunt. So, with the scavenger hunt, I turned it into a competition because I noticed my students are very competitive. So, I told them my top 5 students would be able to get a special treat from me at the end of the week if they had good grades and they completed all the assignments. And they could give me a successful summary over what they learned from the videos that they watched.
Describe a specific experience in which you effectively communicated with parents or guardians to address a student's academic or behavior challenges and fostered a collaborative partnership to support the student's success.
So, one time that I had a conversation with a parent in a conference was in class where we had to do parent teacher conferences, and I collaborated with my group to come up with a successful way to kind of break down what we were going to like not do to her son, but like what we were going to do to get him to the level where we're at, where we're getting him to read correctly and fluently and comprehend what he's reading.
Can you provide an example of a creative or innovative lesson? Let me rephrase that. I apologize. Can you provide an example of a creative and innovative teaching strategy or lesson that you developed to engage and inspire your students?
One lesson that I've done recently, I've already talked about my Civil War lesson, which was a scavenger hunt, and my actual scavenger hunt that was physical, which engaged the students to walk around in and out of the classroom. I've also done a tall tale lesson, which got the students to kind of think critically and engage in creative writing, where they came up with their own tall tale because my lesson was over tall tales. We watched a video over it and I applied it to a standard. And at the end, they wrote a creative tall tale.
What specific characteristics do you possess that makes you qualify for this position?
Um, I have I possess good classroom management skills, and I am a natural leader, and I have good teamwork skills. So I like to collab and get my teammates or my colleagues' opinion on anything that I do, or if they ask me my opinion, I can give it to them. I like to listen and take feedback.
All right. At this time, do you have any questions for us, Ms. Edwards?
Um, what is one thing that you guys are looking for a new teacher coming in?
I think something that's extremely important at our school, Key Elementary, is that a person who has the ability to build relationships with students. We're a small community school. Um, we struggle, our students struggle and have challenges academically, but relationships are key to helping them overcome any obstacles that they may have.
And I think it's in general with any new teacher we bring in, you were looking for somebody that's going to, like you said, be a team player. Um, just be willing to work. I mean, your first year, everything's not going to go perfect, but it's kind of how you respond to that. Are you willing to learn from mistakes, work with other people, take feedback, really just work hard. I think that's the best thing. The first year teacher, you just come in, you work hard. Always are looking to improve and learn. So that's one thing also we look for, just a good work ethic and being a part of the team and community.
What expectations do you have for your teachers and staff?
We have an expectation for all teachers and staff to be professional and make sure you're following any protocols or guidelines of ethics as it relates to the Georgia Standard of Ethics and Professionalism. That's also how you're evaluated. We have an expectation that you believe all students can learn. I think that's very important when it comes to ensuring that you are there for your students and that you are there with the mindset that you can impact student achievement. We also have an expectation with the professionalism that you're here every day, that you show up on time, and like Mr. Golden mentioned, ready to work, that you are collaborative with your peers. Collaboration is key in order to help maximize student achievement as well.
I think kind of just following up on that, for me, especially just you got to treat kids the right way. That's a big thing. How we treat the kids, the expectation is that we treat kids with respect. When we interact with parents, that we treat them with respect, regardless of how we're treated. We're going to always provide that respect and professionalism at all times. That's kind of a non-negotiable. I think really anywhere you're going to be.
I don't have any more questions at the moment.
Okay. All right. And this time we are going to place you in a breakout room briefly so that we can deliberate and come back with some good feedback for you. So give me one moment. Okay, we'll see you in a bit.
Okie dokie.
Okay. There's a lot to unpack here.
I think definitely this is a good experience for her to get this out of the way here.
Yes.
And I'm not knocking because I can imagine how my first interview went was probably very similar to this, that in your mind you had the answers, but it just kind of
Wouldn't come out. Her nerves got the best of her, definitely.
I think so.
My only concern is like yesterday with Cameron, you could tell his nerves got the best of him, but he eventually opened up, right? For this candidate, I believe there is a lot that was not shared to lend to her pedagogy and knowledge. I feel like there was a little bit lack of knowledge here. She did not understand differentiating instruction. She didn't answer most of the questions. All of her examples led back to one particular lesson, which shows that you don't have a lot of experiences to draw from. In my opinion.
I guess that would make sense, but it seems like now with the programs that these kids are going through, that they're given a
They
ton of chance.
are.
I mean,
Well,
more
look
than
at
probably. I'm looking at the resume. It's just
yes,
that's a lot of schools on there. I mean, I
you have a
know
lot of experience.
I did one student teaching. That was it. One semester. That was the only time I was ever, in front of a classroom. So, and then some
Yeah,
of the
she has.
questions that were answered, she answered previous questions in the current question that wasn't.
Mhm.
But even at the end, I think on the last question, you mentioned classroom management, but you didn't really give us any classroom management in that question that we asked.
About
And
managing
collaborate.
behavior.
So really, the parent question was more the collaboration question. So I guess I would tell her that if you get a question on that, that's the time to go back and cover the stuff you didn't cover in the questions
Mhm.
at the very least. But I do think, like you said, there's kind of need to brush up on some of the terminology and the actual instruction
And
side of things.
yes, there's a lack of instructional knowledge that seems to be here, or her nerves just really got the best of her. One of the two, I'm not sure which. But to me,
Because
it was just like even when you're nervous, like other people didn't have the terminology, but they could speak to what they done.
yeah, these questions weren't built for PE, and both those guys really at
They
least
knocked it out of park.
they showed what they knew within the question. I think that's another strategist. If you're not sure, at least show you know something.
Just say what you're doing, and that's why I'm concerned. That's the only why I'm concerned. On paper, like, it's amazing. I would hire her on paper. I'm not 100% sure that, and I'll be honest and frank, based on not her experiences, but the interview itself, that I would just automatically hire you off the interview.
Yeah. I think, and we just, I guess, and ask her, if you know more, we just need to work on showing what you know, because the interview
Yes,
didn't cover that. I would
it
go
didn't
more off.
showcase.
I would go more off the interview than the resume. I'm just going to be
Correct,
honest.
because anybody could have written a resume for you.
Yeah.
And the program actually writes the resume for you. I know the program you used.
Mhm.
You put what you're applying for, and you just click things that you think you have skills in. So you didn't write
Gotcha.
the resume.
Gotcha.
Um, which is nothing wrong with that, because it helps you
No,
with your wording, but
gotcha.
you have to be able to speak to what you're doing. So I think I gave us 5 minutes because we didn't have another interview. So it's gonna automatically bring her back in
Okay.
once we're ready. But
Okay.
yeah, that
So I think it's
scavenger
gonna be
hunt
more of
was,
a, yeah, and even then it sounded more, it was a gallery walk almost, but
that's it. Yeah. It was nothing engaged. Like, when it came to engaging or I don't know. She didn't
I think
answer
it's
the
been more of
questions.
a general feedback, not really for each question, I don't think.
No, 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 no. But like, she really didn't answer, like, she didn't
Mm.
understand DI completely. Not the second one, it was not truly an example, but talked
And
about her process.
and at least the parent answer would have been better for the collaboration at the very least.
Yeah, and then the outcome, she never mentioned what the results were or what the outcome. So she didn't fully answer the question.
Okay.
But the good news is, this is just the mock-in.
Yeah, it's
It's
actually cool to be able to
practice.
help people. That's good.
Yeah,
It's been very useful as an
it's been
undergrad.
very, very, it's been a lot, but it's rewarding at the same time. And I'm usually like extremely, extremely generous with interviewing because I feel like I suck.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
I let you back in
Yeah, if we let you get
automatically.
back in. All right. So we're gonna go ahead and get started with some feedback. Just keep in mind that this feedback is meant to help you grow. This is not by any means punitive or a reflection of what we feel like you're capable of doing. It's a learning process for you, and it's a learning process for us. And we're still in school. We're all growing. Okay.
Mhm.
So starting with your resume and your cover letter. Your cover letter looks fine. I would consider revamping that first sentence. Everything else looks amazing to me. It just seems it's not a strong opening. Like, you could literally remove it and the rest of the cover letter will flow, in my opinion. Or just revamping how you did that first sentence. But the formatting is great. Um, it looks good. It's very engaging. With your resume, um, it's supposed to be about 2 pages, especially at this junction in your career. Now that you're in education, you can go ahead and remove you have enough experience in education here on your resume that you don't need the non-relevant to education option. So you can remove the cashier stuff, and that will probably reduce the length. You don't need the A&K beauty or the chicken salad chick. You don't need
Okay.
that. Yeah. So other than that, same thing. Very nicely formatted. Very enticing, engaging. Is well done. As far as the interview, and we were discussing, we could tell that you're nervous. I'm glad you have had the opportunity to do this. I hope you can get other opportunities, but even if you can't, um, some general knowledge that we think you should and skills you should acquire, even when nervous. Make sure, one, that you fully answer the question. There were several questions where you touched on the beginning parts and then you didn't answer, for example, the full question. For example, it might ask you the example of a specific scenario and what was the outcome? How did it impact student learning? There was a few questions where you were not able to speak to that or you forgot. Do not be afraid if you think you're missing something to say, can you repeat the rest of the question? Can you repeat that question again? Okay, that way you know that you have answered and you're like, oh, I didn't touch on that. It'll trigger you. So don't be afraid before you start or even after you are done and you feel like, I want to make sure I answered your question. Could you repeat the question for me one more time? Totally okay. Nobody's going to they will appreciate that.
Yeah, because some
Um,
folks, they may ask you to elaborate more and some may not. So you would want to make sure you have that chance to fully answer it when it's asked.
mhm. I would say also make sure you have a lot of experience here on your resume. it- you might want to have some notes. You're virtual or in person. Don't be afraid to have your resume in front of you. Don't be afraid to have some general notes to refer back to. We can guarantee you, and I'll let Steve speak to a few topics that are going to probably always come up on your teacher interviews to have some some canned responses for that so you can refer back to. You need to make sure that you can reflect on all of your experiences. You kept referring to one or two scenarios, and I can tell by this resume that you have plenty of experience to draw from. So again, when nerves kick in, you want bullet points or something you can refer back to, like, oh, let me mention this or let me mention that. All right. So it's okay to be nervous. You want to be able to make sure that you can reflect on that. And I'm going to stop and let Mr. Golden
Yeah,
listen
so
to
like
questions.
she said, there's going to always be certain topics that probably in any school you interview at that you're going to have those questions asked. So you're always going to be asked some form of a question about classroom management, whether it's specifically about classroom management or how you dealt with a certain situation. Because that question basically was kind of asking about classroom management. You know, what would you do when this situation happens? So you'll get that example. Um, you always probably get a question about how you work with students with disabilities. So when you're kind of working on that, always know, you know, especially being a classroom teacher, um, IEPs, MTSS, 504s, kind of just understand that lingo so you can say, you know, always the great answer is I'm going to follow the student's IEP. And that lets us know what you understand that if there's a student with a disability, most likely have an IEP or a 504, I'm going to follow what that is. Um, let's see, what else was it?
Differentiation.
Differentiation. And I'll be honest, that is a tough strategy and skill. I mean, there are veteran teachers that we have PLs on that
Still how to
don't
differentiate.
they don't understand what it is. So that's not an easy question, but it could put you ahead if you could go in and understand what that is and provide examples. I'm sure you've done lessons that were differentiated. So kind of in your mind, go ahead and have, kind of, she said, have some bullet points prepared, knowing going into an interview that if I'm asked this question, I'm going to refer back to this lesson I did or this experience. So
Hmm.
you kind of can go through the questions we asked and think about and kind of in your head, go ahead and plan for a specific example or lesson or something that happened that you can use. Um, like with collaboration, that could be as simple as I went to team meetings when I student taught and things like that. Um, and that's really kind of what we're looking for. You started off strong on that one, but then you can say I used the resources my teacher provided. Just kind of reframe that answer because you did answer it. You met with the teacher, they gave you resources, they observed your lesson, gave you feedback. You kind of just restructured that. I think it was there. Like I
And
said,
then
based on your experience
and
and
don't
looking,
forget the impact on learning. Like this, the last, because it's really not about your process. All of the process is great to get you there, but you can have the best lesson. And if your students didn't grasp the content or the material, that's the reflection piece. So that's why that ending is always there. What was the impact on student learning? What were the results? With differentiation, is content, you can differentiate by content, process, product, or learning environment. And so you need to know what that looks like and how you're doing it. It could be content, could be, since you were talking about literature, could be they all had an opportunity to have different stories based on their ability level or the process. Some were audio, some read the text. Like, so just looking at the differentiation.
and then let's see the positive reinforcement, and especially for elementary, you're going to get that. Some of the examples we had when we were going over the answers, we kind of wanted to hear. Um, Class Dojo. So I'm sure in your elementary experiences, you've seen different programs and platforms that teachers use for positive reinforcement. So that could be a good example. Um, you got PBIS, um, building relationships, which you did mention. So I think all this. Just kind of go ahead and be kind of when you go into an interview, say, hey, you kind of have an idea when I'm asked this question where I'm going to go. Because
Mm-hmm.
it's tough. I mean, and you sometimes you'll over prepare. You may get questions that are a lot simpler than this, and even then, though,
Mm-hmm.
you'll be prepared and have ready.
And then,
Parent contact, you're going to get that one. So just
mhm.
um, one good kind of stock answers. I'll follow whatever policy the district and school has. If there's X amount of communication I'm supposed to have, there's a certain platform I'm supposed to use, whether it's Kimbo or email or however it is, because depending on where you're at, the way you communicate with parents will vary. It could be from parents expect a message about everything all the time, or it could be a school where none of the numbers in Infinite Campus or whatever platform work, and you're having to rely on whatever you can come up with to create communication. So I
And
think
then
that's
making sure that you contact for us when we're looking at it, making sure you understand the significance of contacting parents early and build that relationship so that when you do have to address any behavior academic concern, there isn't as much pushback. So early and often, not just when something is wrong. That's very important when it comes to communication with parents.
because these questions are tough for someone who hasn't been a
Been in
teacher,
there. Hmm.
only going on. And so what you can do though is have a good understanding of what teachers are doing with these things. So you can explain, like she just said, I know that, I'm going to contact parents for positive things and build that rapport so that when I do any contact about something that may not be as positive, they'll know that I'm coming from a place of caring and love and that we can make that happen. Um, so
But I
really
did
just,
like that your response to that question because you talked
yeah,
about how we came up with a plan and I
yes.
collaborated with the parent on what we can do to help them with their comprehension. That was a great response.
And I would also say, if you ever get that question like the last one, where it's kind of an open question, that's a good time too that you can go back and cover anything you may have missed or forgot to say earlier. So like when we said, what are some characteristics we want to hire you? You mentioned classroom manager. That's the time, even though we didn't ask that, that's the time to say, hey, I'm going to go through now. I'm going to mention, what I'll do. And we're like that.
Hmm.
That's not going to hurt you. I mean, that's kind of where you're selling yourself. My last
Hmm.
person, we told him, this is the question. He would rephrase it and say, hey, sell me on why I should hire you.
Hmm.
And that's what that question was. And that's your chance to come in and really, even if maybe you felt you didn't answer some of the previous questions the best of your ability, that's your time to come back there and really flow with, I'm going to tell you why you should hire me. I'm going to tell you what I know, what I'm going to
Hmm.
do. And that means a lot. And that's what the last thing we'll ask. And that's always a good thing to end on. So,
I
um,
would say that's your elevator speech. Like that's you should have prepared and memorized because they're gonna ask you some sort of question. Some people throw you off and asking in the beginning. I've had that happen to me. It's like, why should we hire you on the first question? I'm like, what? Um, but whatever your elevator speech is to sell yourself, you should have that down packed and memorized so it can be a lasting impact.
and it'll be the same like when they tell us about yourself. I think
Mm-hmm.
that answer evolves every time because when you first off, you kind of just telling your whole life story,
Yeah.
but really you can use that question also to frame why you should hire me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
tell why you want to be a teacher, what impacted you, show your passion there. So I
Mm-hmm.
think anytime you have an opportunity to show your passion for teaching, that's always let that shine.
All right. Do you have any other questions? Feedback?
No,
No.
I really do appreciate the feedback, and I'll make sure I apply it for my next interview.
Mhm. If it's just that's what it's for. We're just here to support. And again, it helps us reflect on, our higher practices and things of that nature as well. So hopefully it
Yeah,
wasn't too much and too overwhelming. It wasn't meant to be that way. It was just meant to help you prepare.
I
Well,
commend all of y'all for doing this because it's tough. I mean, we were
Mhm.
just talking. I didn't get anything like this in my undergrad program. Um, it would have been very useful. I can look back on some interviews I did that, you know, I drove 5 hours for what a 10-minute interview for something, and I never gave myself a shot.
Mhm.
But like I said, this is early. It's only February, so this is good practice. And I'll be honest, the questions we came up with are not easy.
Mm.
I
No,
mean,
and
it's
that we were challenged to come up with
yeah,
behavioral. These are behavioral interview questions. They're not just generic, you
no.
know,
And a lot of
who,
most
what,
school
when, where.
districts have a set interview questions that because if I interview 10 people for this job, all the questions need to be
The
the
same.
same to make it
Hmm.
fair. So
But
this is
imagine if you,
a lot harder than you're probably going to experience when you interview for your first couple jobs. So don't let
Mhm.
this be a detriment at all. These are tough questions. And I'll
Yep.
be honest, I couldn't answer the differentiation question as good as you did. I would have been so confused. And um, so these are tough. So don't let that discourage you. These are tough questions. But just kind of go ahead and think about the highlights you've gone through in different experiences. Just kind of go ahead and be prepared in your mind that when I'm asked this question, this is what I'm gonna
Hmm.
say.
Yep. And the only other question that might come up, schools might want you to tell them why this school or something like that. So you might want to do your research on the school or ask, at least have questions. When your question should be, one of them should be something about the school itself, like specific to the school. I know you did have a question about, what are your expectations of me? Those were decent questions, but like
Mhm.
showing that you did research for that actual school is something that's really good. And if you approach the question, your responses with answering the interview behavioral way, you're going to knock it out of the park. I promise. So,
And one more they might ask you is the strength and weakness question. And the
mm,
weakness you kind of need to flip into
a learning
not something
experience.
I'm not good at. It's something I want to be able to learn more about or have more experience in. Because that can
Hmm.
sometimes be a trap to get somebody to say, "Oh, I can't control kids. That's my weakness." No, you want to frame it to something that, this is something I hadn't been exposed to as much, but I'd like to be able to learn more about it and become more versed in what this is and whatever. So just always make everything positive.
Hmm. Okay. Well, if you don't have any other questions or concerns, again, thank you so much for joining us today. And we hope you have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great one.
You too.